Merry readers, come cozy in. Let the story time begin with Robin and the Marys.
Hi Merry Readers! Today is September 23rd, and that means it is time for Chapter 6 of A Discovery of Witches. Today's chapter is an exciting one because we learn a little bit more about Diana and what's going on with Ashmole 782, and so it's just a really fun chapter. So this chapter starts with Diana waking up and going for a run to clear her head. She comes back and she meets up with the porter, which is the man at her front door at her dorm, and he tells her that he's so sorry that he had to turn away her guest last night. And Diana's confused because she was home in the evening and she didn't remember anyone calling or getting any phone calls, and she realizes that she often turns her phone off because her aunts have a really hard time with the time difference between New York and Oxford. So she says, oh, it's no problem, and he says, I'm really, really sorry. She seemed lovely. I really like Australians. I would have happily let her up, but it's the school's policy. And so Diana thanks him and says in future she'll be sure to let him know if she's expecting anyone, and she goes upstairs to get ready, and she's a little bit curious about who this is because she doesn't know any Australian women in particular, and she finds it to be curious. So she gets dressed and she goes off to the Bodleian, and when she arrives, Matthew is already there, and she notices that instead of setting up in her section, this time he's set up close to the door of the Bodleian. And so she's a little bit relieved from this because even though he's still there and she'll still feel his gaze on her, he won't be sitting right next to her, so she prefers that. So she goes to Sean, she grabs her manuscripts that she had asked for the day, and she's walking over to her table when she notices that Matthew's not alone. He has an assistant with him who he calls Miriam Shepherd, and the two of them are kind of bickering a little bit. She can tell that he has a very close working relationship with this woman, and he catches her eye. He completely breaks character and he puts on a smile and he says, good morning, Dr. Bishop. This is Miriam Shepherd, my research assistant. And he explains that they're doing research here and that the library was kind enough to give him a different section, so hopefully no one would be bothering her today with her research. And so she thanks them and she goes and sits down and starts doing research. And so as she's sitting, of course, she feels other creatures come in, but to her surprise, they don't come anywhere close to her. They all kind of linger by Matthew or go to other parts of the library. And so this gives her a false sense of security that they're not after her, no one's following her, they are here because of Matthew. And so she does work until she starts to get hungry, and she stands up and she goes to the desk and she asks Sean if he would like to eat, but he says he's too busy with work. And at that moment, Matthew looks at Miriam and says, Miriam, it's time for lunch. Miriam kind of snidely responds and says, oh, I'm not hungry, but Matthew says that nutrition is very important and she should go and have something to eat. And so she follows Diana out, and Diana goes to the college's cafe, and while she's there, she's sitting and eating her food, and she knows that Miriam is sitting just on the floor below, probably listening and keeping an eye on where she is. And so she kind of enjoys the fact that Miriam's having to sit with all of the tourists that come to Oxford for the day, who come to the cafe to get something to eat. And as she's sitting there, a woman comes up, and the woman sits down across from her and introduces herself as Agatha Wilson. And Diana kind of has a vague memory of her, maybe from a fashion magazine. She's dressed really well, but what strikes Diana immediately is that she gets the tingling feeling of a demon from her. So she knows that right away this woman is a demon, and she notices that her accent is Australian. And so Agatha Wilson sits down and she introduces herself, and she tells Diana that she had tried to stop by to meet her last night, but that she has something very important to share with Diana. And she passes across the table a news article from London, and in the news article it shares that 2 boys were killed recently, and that Peter Knox was actually brought in for questioning because the way that these boys were killed was so violent that they thought that perhaps it was a satanic ritual or something like that. And Peter Knox had written quite a few books on modern occultism, and so Diana looks at through the article and she looks at Agatha Wilson and she just kind of says, I don't really know why you're showing me this. I don't know what this has to do with me. And so Agatha Wilson brings up the manuscript and basically tells Diana that she knows that Diana found Ashmole 782 and that she knows that the witches know and the vampires know, and she stresses to Diana that the demons have as much of a right, if not more, of a right to know about the book. And so Diana is very confused and she asks Agatha Wilson, what is so important about this book? And Agatha shares with her that the book is the meaning of life for each of the creatures and it has their history and their purpose. And so Diana, in a very naive way, kind of responds and says, well, what is the big deal about that? We all know why we're here. We know what we are meant for. And Agatha shares that demons really don't know. She says that demons are born often from human parents and that oftentimes they don't have any community around them unless they happen upon another demon or a witch who is friendly or a vampire who is friendly, which is very rare. So a lot of demons are actually prone to suicide and heavy depression because they live such solitary lives without community. So Diana thinks back to what she has heard growing up, and she recalls in her head that her aunts often talk down on demons and consider them to be a lesser race than everyone else because they don't have the bloodlines that witches have, they don't have the bloodlines that vampires have, and so she starts to feel a bit badly for the demons and realizing what a hard time they have. And so they go back and forth a bit, and Agatha ends up asking Diana that if she does find the book again, would she please look into it for the demons and explain to them what their purpose is in life, why they're here, because they really don't know and it's such a hard existence for them to live. So after a little bit of time, she leaves and Diana promises without even realizing what she's promising. And as Agatha is leaving, she tells Diana to be aware that some promises are more important than others, and that she's sure they will see each other soon. Diana is just kind of spiraling in all that she's learned, and she cleans up after herself. She walks out of the cafe. She can feel Miriam following her back to the Bodleian, and when she arrives, she notices that the library is completely full, this time of humans, and so she goes back over to her spot and she does her research until the very end of the day. But she found throughout the rest of the day that it was really hard for her to focus, and more often than not she was actually thinking about all that she had learned over the last couple of days. And so finally she's done with her work and she packs everything up. She writes out her request slips for Sean, drops off her old books and the stack of request slips for him, and thanks him for all that he's done for her today. And then she had decided that she needed to do two things before she left the library. The first was that she needed to thank Matthew because she realized that he was the one who was keeping all of the other creatures away from her all day. So it wasn't that they were trying to flock around him, but rather that they couldn't go past him because he was keeping them all away from her so she could do her work. So she walks over to Matthew and Miriam and she thanks them for keeping everyone away and giving her the space to do her research. And then she had also decided that she needed to learn some more from Matthew about the book. So when he says, "You're welcome, Dr. Bishop, it was our pleasure," she responds to him by saying, "Please call me Diana." And it catches him off guard. He gives her a big smile and he responds with, "Only if you call me Matthew." And so this response makes her blush and she feels herself warming up, and she realizes that Matthew can actually sense the change in her, which is a little bit embarrassing. And so she thanks them, she says goodnight, and she goes on her way, and she goes home, and she has all of this energy, so she decides to go rowing. And while she's rowing, she notices that far off in the distance, there's a little blur of a shadow that keeps going ahead and ahead from her. And she realizes that that little blur is probably Matthew keeping her safe. So that is where the chapter leaves us. For our questions for this chapter, I have my notes down below again, so bear with me. So this chapter, the setting starts with her running around Oxford, then she visits with the porter at her door of her dormitory, and then she goes, of course, to the Bodleian, and then we get to hear a little bit about the cafe at Oxford, and then, of course, she ends at the river. So that is all of the settings for this chapter. The characters, we have Diana, we have Matthew, we meet Miriam, we see Sean again, we also meet Agatha Wilson, and we get to know the door porter a little bit. And then of course there's the name dropping of Peter Knox in the article. The historical and academic Easter eggs in this chapter, we have Ashmole 782, we have the newspaper clippings, so this is just kind of an important part of learning a little bit more about Peter Knox and that he's written books about modern occultism. The magic watch, there isn't really explicit magic in this, but there is just more of the undertone of magic from Matthew keeping others away, Diana sensing all the creatures, and just her sense that there is more to know about Ashmole 782 than what she knows now. For symbols and details, there's not really anything too important. Again, it's just Ashmole 782 being important again, the newspaper, her remembering seeing Agatha Wilson in a fashion magazine, and so that's really it for this chapter. Nothing too important. The romance watch, of course, we have the tenderness at the end of the chapter where they give each other permission to call each other by their first names, and Diana blushes and she notices that Matthew can sense the change in her, and it's just a very tense, sweet, passionate moment between the two of them. Food and drink. So in this, we get to know a little bit about the cafe and that Diana really likes to go there because she loves the sandwiches and she kind of just is a creature of habit. And so that is one of her favorite places to go for lunch. The overall vibe of this one is it's very inquisitive. So I think that this was a heavy information chapter. We learned a lot in a very short amount of time, and meeting Agatha Wilson, it was kind of cool to hear another very knowledgeable creature, and this time a demon, talk not only about Ashmole 782, but about the kind of class division between the races of magical creatures and beings. So I think that this was a really powerful chapter for that because it gave the readers a little bit more info into the fact that witches think that they are the supreme beings, vampires think that they are the supreme beings, and demons don't really know what their purpose is. And so hearing about how hard that is for the demons, it was touching, and I think it was a very powerful chapter because it parallels a lot to real life and how all of these class divisions, race divisions are such an important topic throughout history and how they're still prevalent and even more prevalent right now. So I really appreciated that little touch that Deborah Harkness put into all of this. Foreshadowing, there's a ton of foreshadowing because there's this whole murder situation that's going on in London, and it seems as though there's other murders going on as well, because in the article you hear about 2 other murders that had happened other places that were almost exactly the same. And since the murders were an attack of the neck and supreme blood loss, it's assumed that it could be a vampire. That's at least what my assumption is as the reader. So I think that that's some foreshadowing there. Peter Knox and his obsession with modern occultism, I think that that is going to play a big part in what comes next. And then, of course, there's just Diana and Matthew and their relationship foreshadowing and the fact that they're starting to get to know each other a little bit more and getting a little bit more personal with each other. So for this one, the discussion question that I'm going to leave everyone with is, Agatha asked Diana to promise to remember demons. How do you feel about Diana really saying immediately after she promises yes that she's not sure what she just promised yes to? And how do we feel about that? Do we think that that is going to be important later on? Do we think that this is one of those magical worlds where promises can be magically binding? Are there going to be consequences for her in making such a bold promise, and when she really doesn't know if she can follow through with it? So that is my question for discussion today. Of course, please feel free to talk about anything else you would like to in the comments below, and I will see you all tomorrow for chapter 7. Bye!
So many readers, close your eyes. Let the stories lift and rise. Till next time, when lights will gleam.